Hi, I'm Angela of midmodernmama.com, and I'm so excited you're here with me today. I am going to show you some really fun ways to make gift wrap out of napkins. I inherited a bunch of vintage linens from my grandmother not too long ago, and as a result, I've been trying to kind of figure out how to repurpose them, what to do with them. And one of the ideas I thought that made a lot of sense was to use them as gift wrap. So I created a couple of ideas. If you've been watching my tutorials, a couple of days ago, we made these cute little pouches out of a napkin. They're lined, they're super easy to make, a great little project. If you're a novice sewer or if you are a professional, anywhere in between, they're super, super simple. So check out that tutorial. I made this one also during that tutorial. I just love them. They are super easy and they're great for putting a little gift in. You can even make them into a jewelry bag, and I talked about the different variations you can use in that tutorial. Today we're going to make what I'm calling the petal bag, because at the top it looks like it has petals. But this is also super easy. This is also made out of a vintage napkin. You could, of course, make it out of a new napkin. That would be easy, or a square of fabric that you want to hem. The nice thing about napkins is they're already hemmed, they're ready to go, they're the right size, and this takes very little sewing to make it happen. In fact, I'll show you how you could make it a no-sew project as well. If you're not a seamstress, all you need is an iron. But they're very, very simple, cute little drawstring bag. All you need is, I keep holding it the wrong way. All you need is a napkin, a way to do the seams, and I'll show you that, and also some ribbon. So let's transition to my other camera, and I'll give you an idea of how to get going. So now we're looking at my desktop, and turn off that. Let me know if there's a problem with the sound quality. The other day when I was doing this, someone said, "Oh, I'm hearing you twice," and I'm not quite sure what happened with that, but let me know if there's a problem, and I'll see if I can fix it. You can type that in the comments. Also, let me know where you're from, and if you're working on sewing projects today or whatever you're working on. I've been out in the garden this morning, and now I'm taking a little breather, cooling off a little bit, and working inside. So let me know what's going on with you. Today we're going to work on this. I'm going to do this two different ways. This is so simple that in this tutorial I'm going to do it twice and show you two different ways to do it. I have this pretty little vintage napkin, and then I have some ribbon here. This is from Renaissance Ribbons, and I've linked in the scroll below down there. You can see several different varieties that Renaissance Ribbons offers. I love their quality ribbons. So I'm going to use this today with this. And then the second one I'm going to do is I'm going to use this napkin, which has this little embroidered piece. And I'm going to show you what to do if your napkins are embellished in one particular spot. And I'll show you how to make that work. And for this one, I'm going to use some seam binding tape, which I'll show you how to finish that as well. This is an exciting day too. I actually hooked up a second camera, so you're going to have a view not just of my workspace here, but also of my sewing machine. So we'll see how all of that works out. But like I said, this is the end product. This is what it will look like, and it's just a little cute little drawstring bag, and it makes the gift wrap is as special as whatever you put inside. And if you're thinking about nice gifts for people, I have a whole gift giving guide actually on my website. This is one of the things that I really believe in. I believe in giving good gifts. That doesn't mean expensive gifts, but I believe in giving good gifts and finding the right gift for the right person. And I have a whole guide for that on my website, but also in the scroll down below, I have included some of my favorite gifts that would probably fit in, depending on the size of your napkin, in a little Petal bag like this. So there are all kinds of things down there that you can scroll through. So if you're wondering, why are there candles and lotion when you're doing a sewing project? Well, that's why. I got a couple little drips of water on here when I was refilling, putting my water in for steam, but those will steam right out. So the first thing I feel like is really important when you're starting this project, these napkins were of course washed, and this one actually had some funny little stains on it, and all but this one came out. And I'll tell you, I also have a guide on my website for how to wash vintage linens and get that kind of musty smell out. I have been doing it for the last about week or so. I got several boxes of linens from my grandmother's home, and I have been going through and washing them, and these particular napkins were part of that. And I have a whole process for doing that. It involves lots of soaking and woolite. Woolite just seems to be the best thing. But it's all about spending the time and really doing it slowly. So you can check that out. In fact, I'll pause right now and I will put that link in the chat so that you can refer to it if needed. This is one of the questions that I get often about what do I recommend? Because I do a lot of sewing, a lot of everything with vintage linens. And I have several projects, how to make pillowcases, all kinds of things. All right, I'm finding that link for you. But I have done, over the years, I've kind of developed a system that I really love and that works really well. So I'll tuck that right in the chat. There you go, in case you're looking for that. There's the link. So anyway, I'm going to iron this really well. I really love this Rowenta iron. It works really well. And one of the things I love about this particular one, which I linked to in the crawl below, is that it doesn't require filtered water. You can use just normal tap water in this, and that's unusual for Rowenta irons. So I particularly appreciate. So iron it really well. In case you're wondering what I'm using over here, this is it's a pad, an ironing pad, a wool ironing pad. I love this because I don't have to pull out my ironing board every time I sit down to sew, especially if I'm doing something little like this. So it just goes right on my table and it protects my tabletop and is a really nice surface for ironing too. Okay, so if you are, as you're making one of these little bags, you need a square of fabric. And that square of fabric can be basically any size. I love a good napkin. These are so pretty because they have this hand-hemmed detail on them that are so lovely. They're vintage. They wrinkle like crazy, which is part of why I'm not going to use them at my table. But I also think they make a really pretty gift wrap. So the first thing you're going to want to do to pull this together is you want to find the center point of your napkin. And in this case, I had already folded these and pressed it, and so the center point is right here. But if you haven't done that, then fold your napkin in half and fold it in half again, and then just press that corner so that you have a nice center point to work from. Because what you want to do to create those even petals that show up on this little bag is that you want these corners to be roughly even. I'm also going to use this quilter square. It is one of the tools. I don't quilt, but I use this all the time. And so this will help me make those as even as possible. So with this, I'm going to fold this in. I'm making sure that the corner is lined up with the center, okay? And that's giving me, if you put the corner of your quilter square right on the center, and you line up the corner of the tip of the napkin on this line. So we're using this line right here. And then you come down, and this line is lining up with the edge of your napkin, and everything's in a line. That means that you have a good angle here and everything is equidistant. So on this particular napkin, which is, I'm not even sure what the dimensions are here. Let me measure for you. It is 9, roughly 15 inches square. And one of the things I found working with vintage linens, they're not always perfectly square because a lot of them are hand done. But in this case, it's roughly 15 inches square. So I'm folding down each corner about 4.5 inches. And so I'm going to just press that. You do not need to do something fancy, just press it at 4.5 inches folded in. If there is a right side and a wrong side to the fabric that you're doing, you want this triangle, as you're looking at it like this, to be the right side up. So I'll show you that in a minute when we do the other one that has embroidery on it. But you'll want this triangle as you fold it in to be the right side up. So now I'm going to get that lined up with the center roughly, and I want this to be 4.5 inches, and that's a little higher than 4.5 inches, so I'm going to adjust. That is 4.5 inches. So press this one. All right. Now we're going to go 4.5 inches here. This is so simple, you guys. And if you have, if you are not a seamstress, if you don't sew, there is a super easy way to avoid sewing too. All you need is some fusible tape, which is kind of like double stick tape for fabric. And you'll notice as you're looking at this, these triangles are not looking exactly the same. That's okay. But that is because this fabric, this napkin is not absolutely 100% symmetrical. So they're not exactly the same, but they're close enough. All right, that's 4.5 inches. So again, okay, so now we have all of these folded down. And when I'm doing something like this, I love these little clips instead of pins. I love them for super delicate fabric. They're fantastic. And I am just going to put a couple of clips here just to hold everything down while I sew. These are also in the scroll. They are one of my favorite things. I know if you are a quilter, you use these all the time. I learned about them from a quilter friend of mine. And they are so much easier than straight pins. So, not for everything, but for this kind of project, totally great. And for super delicate fabrics where you don't want to have the holes of straight pin. All right, so now I'm going to head over to my sewing machine, and here's what we're going to do. I'm just going to make a simple seam right across here. Super, super easy. And that becomes the channel for my ribbon to go through. So in this case, this ribbon is, we'll use the ruler, see how wide it is. It is about 1/2 inch. So I will use the 1/2 inch guide on my machine and make this just slightly bigger than 1/2 inch as a channel for the ribbon to run through. So this is going to create this drawstring, and the ribbon will be the drawstring. So about 1/2 inch, and we'll just run around. And I'll show you, because it's easier to see, because of this pretty, the pretty edge that's going here, I'm just going to go from edge to edge on each one of the sides. It does not have to go all the way to the end here. I'm just going to create that channel kind of edge to edge right there. So let's switch over to my sewing machine camera. And we will sew. So I'm working on a Janome. I love the sewing machine so very much, let me tell you. It is fantastic. It's the QOV 3160. If you are looking for a new sewing machine, I highly recommend this one from personal experience. I really love it. Okay, so I'm going to go with a 3/4 inch seam allowance here. And there we go. This is super quick. One side. And I'm going to, because I have it available on this particular machine, I am going to use one of the kind of fancier stitches. I don't get to use those very often. So I'm going to set this to, I'm choosing number 26, which is a little bit of a kind of a flowery pattern, leaves really. All right, here we go. So you'll notice I'm stitching on the top parts, so where these, where the points are. Just coming across. And I'll stop right before I get to that pretty hem. Scissors. Snip those ends. Snip off my lead threads. I have, I don't know if you can see this. I have this cute little bag that I made. I'm going to do a tutorial on how to make those at some point. But that is what, if you see me just kind of discarding thread, that's what it's going into. It is super handy to have something like that sitting by your machine. I love doing that. All right, get this lined up. And away we go. So my last sewing machine was about 25 years old when I got this one. It was also a Janome. It had served me well for 25 years. But I did not realize how much sewing machines had changed And it was not a very fancy sewing machine 25 years ago. It was a gift from my grandmother, who is an amazing seamstress and quilter. And she gave that to me when I graduated from graduate school. And I used it all the time. But it was pretty worn out, and this one has fancy stitches. I also don't have to use a petal, which I kind of like, actually. You can use a petal, but it has this start and stop, which I find really easy to control. I really like it. So there's just a little button on the front that you start and stop with. So, and it threads itself, which is pretty fantastic too. All right. 3/4 of an inch. Again, starting right at that at the fancy hand done edge. Now, if you are not a sewer, or you want to do this really quickly, all you need to do is take, instead of sewing this, you're going to take iron-on fusible tape, and you're going to put a strip at each of these places where I am sewing and iron it. It is not going to last forever that way, but it would certainly last through giving a gift and probably being reused a couple of times, which is all you really need it to do. And then somebody else could, whoever you've given it to, can sew it or replace the seam binding tape, or the fusible tape, if that is something that they would want to do, but it can be reused over and over again. And one of the things that I am trying to do this year is move myself away from wrapping paper as much as possible and paper gift wrap. It just is not ecologically friendly. A lot of wrapping paper can't be recycled. A lot of municipalities don't recycle wrapping paper at all. In my area, I can drive it to a recycling center. I can collect it all. So, like, for Christmas, when we celebrate Christmas, I collect all the wrapping paper together, and I put it in a big bag, and then the next time I'm headed over there, I drop it off at the recycling center, which is nice. I'm very grateful to be able to do that. But a lot of places you can't even do that, and that's frustrating. Just so that you know, well, wrapping paper, you can't recycle anything that has like foil on it. So anything that's super shiny can't be recycled at all. And so really be careful when you're buying wrapping paper. If you are looking for recycling wrapping paper that can be recycled, don't get anything that has foil on it, because that can't be recycled at all. The other thing you should know too is that tissue paper can't be recycled, but it can be composted. So if you have compost service in your area, tissue paper can be composted. Or if you have a compost bin in your backyard, you can compost tissue paper, which is pretty handy. Okay, I'm taking this back over to my desk area. That one. Okay, so here we are. We have all 4 seams done. And now it looks like this. So now all we have to do is gather it together. And for this, you're going to need a safety pin and whatever ribbon you've chosen. You can use string to do this. You can use yarn. You could, there are a whole host of things that you can create your drawstring from. And the easiest thing to do, if you've never created a drawstring before, is to take a safety pin and put it in the end. And then you're going to use that safety pin to scooch this along. And it's much easier to grab a safety pin on the inside of your bag, for example, on the inside of the seam than it is to grab anything else, the ribbon itself. So a safety pin is great, and I always use a big one. So I'm making sure that my ribbon is flat, and the right side of the ribbon, because this has a right side and a wrong side, not every ribbon does, but this does, the right side of the ribbon is on the same side as these little flaps. That's going to help make this easy. All right. And then we just go from one of these little sewn down flaps to the next and pull this together. Pull the ribbon along. That's the third side. See how it's all starting to bunch up along that ribbon. And there's the fourth side. So I did not cut my ribbon yet. You can cut it ahead of time if you need to do that, but I left it so that I can then kind of gauge, once this is tight, how much ribbon I'm going to need. And then just do this and grab some scissors, snip it off so I can make a nice generous bow here. Now you'll notice in these in-between areas right here, you have this kind of little pucker. You can go in if you want to and sew this closed. And I will say that that really depends on the size of your napkin. In this case, this napkin is pretty little, so I didn't really feel like I needed to do that. But you can go and sew just right here, right along here, sew it closed before or after you put the ribbon in. That is a super simple thing to do. But it is unnecessary. And I say that like in a, it doesn't have to happen that way, because it will just, those little folds will just kind of tuck into your bag once you draw the drawstring tight. So let's stuff this with something so you can see what it looks like when it's full. What do I have that can go in there? So we'll use some scraps of fabric, tuck it in, and then you pull it tight and tie a nice bow. And that is a sweet little wrapped bag. Oops. Wrap that with the pretty side out. I love this ribbon so much. So pretty. There. And then cut the ends of the ribbons, and that is a nicely wrapped gift. So sweet. Cut these off. Two ways to cut ribbon, either at an angle, or if you cut it like this, that helps keep it from fraying. So there it is, super easy. Now, I will tell you, I have done this on several different scales. This one, let me switch to my desktop view. So this bag right here is the very same concept, but it's much bigger. I made this out of a, you can see it better. This is a little vintage tablecloth, but it's really little. It is the size of, like, not even a card table. It's kind of a funny little size. So, and it has this sweet little equestrian scene done on one corner. So what I did for this one, because it's bigger and because the fabric on the inside, which would be the outside of the bag when it's gathered, was a little bit fragile, I actually lined this. So you can see, I just added a piece of white fabric to the back. It's actually a piece of a sheet. And created essentially a inside out pillowcase, and then turned it and stitched up the corner. And now it is a reusable bag. Super easy. This would totally hold, oh, who knows? I mean, you could put a game inside here. You could put all kinds of things. It would absolutely hold clothes, all kinds of stuff, and is completely reusable time and time again. So for this one, I also use seam binding tape, which I stitched up, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But that is a really simple way to reuse one of those tablecloths that is just a size we don't use anymore. So, or at least I don't in my house. And I actually have a pile of them from my grandmother. So I'm going to be making a bunch of these cute little bags and use them to wrap presents in. And I think it'll be super, super easy. So let me show you how to do this a little differently. This is the very same idea with a different napkin. It's a slightly bigger napkin, and I'm going to sew up those edges so you can see how that works too. So let's go back to the other camera. Okay, so this napkin, let me get all my samples out of the way here a little bit. And I need to wake up my iron again. Okay, so this napkin has a little embroidered motif in the corner. So I think this is super sweet, and we're going to pair it with some seam binding tape, and I'll show you how to turn that into the drawstring ribbon. But it'll do the very same thing. It doesn't need to be lined. If you were going to line a napkin and so that it's not a sheer, or you want a different finish, you could put a contrasting fabric on it, for example, something like this. Then you just are going to sew them with the right sides together. Cut a square the same size as your napkin or the square of fabric you're already working with. Sew them right sides together and leave, you know, an inch or two opening at one edge. Turn it inside out, sew that opening shut, and then press it all, and you're ready to go. But this one doesn't need to be lined either. So, I love the scallopy edge on this. I have a pile of these sweet napkins too. And you'll notice it was folded, so I already have my midpoint, and I'm just not even going to iron that out so I can reuse it. This napkin was also pretty heavily stained, and doing the couple days of soaking with woolite and then a finish of OxyClean got this super clean and ready to go. And like the other napkins, the green one, this one you would really have to iron every time you're going to use it. And frankly, we are not that kind of family at all. So we just are not going to be the people who iron our napkins before dinner every night. So I use lots of cloth napkins, but they are ones that I do not have to iron every day. Okay, so here, same concept. that we did with the last one. I am going to get my square and then measure it out. This is a slightly bigger napkin, not a lot bigger, but slightly bigger than those green ones. And because of the placement, so if you're doing something with an embroidered edge or an embroidered motif, start with that corner because you want your seam allowance. And remember, like for this, I'm probably going to do, on the last napkin, I had to leave a 1/2 inch because that ribbon was wider. This isn't as wide, so it'll probably be 1/3 of an inch maybe that I end up going with in terms of a seam allowance. So, but you want to figure out like where is this embroidered motif going to end up in relationship to your stitching. You don't want to stitch through it. So here I'm going to use 5 inches as my guide, and that's not quite lined up the way I want it to be. The corner needs to be in line with that middle point. Now it is. And now we're at 5 inches. So one tool that I haven't talked about, and I forgot to put this in the scroll, but that I really like is this Violet Craft roller. You can use it instead of an iron in a lot of cases. This is another one of those quilting tools that I just love. But if you roll that seam, you're not going to mess it up between where you are and your iron, unless you're doing this, of course, on an ironing board, in which case you're good to go. So I need to pull that in just a little bit. That is lined up. This is going to be 5 inches. That is in line. That's at the right angle. Roll that out. And then I'm going to press it for good measure. And again, make sure these two are in line. How do you know that they're in line? So put your corner in that middle spot. I'm having trouble finding the middle suddenly. There it is. Put your corner in the middle spot, line up the middle of this point on that same line, and then what should happen is that this edge should line up perfectly with one of the lines on your square. That's why I like to use a square. If it doesn't line up perfectly with the square, then you're not going to have this nice right angle. And that's what you're looking for. So then go back and fix that. Let's see, that's not quite 5 inches. So this needs to come in a little bit. Yep, that's right. Again, this is not something where you need to stress out. You're not making a beautifully tailored blouse, for example. This is not something you have to stress out about. It's just nice to kind of get that as close to even as possible. And again, I feel like my midpoint is wrong on this napkin. That is not looking right. But that also could be that my napkin is slightly rectangular as opposed to being square. So let's try this again and make sure that's right. Yep, it's just that it's slightly rectangular and not perfectly square, because those are lined up correctly. This will be lined up correctly. And that's just the way it goes with vintage and handmade things. I don't think this was hand, and certainly the embroidery is not hand done, but It's clearly not perfect either, and that's okay. Close enough is 100% fine. I'm going to redo that one just a little bit. Oops. Never helpful to do things left-handed for me. Okay, so now that is all lined up and ready to go. We're going to clip this out. And again, if you were doing this and you don't want to sew, here's where you just use the fusible tape and an iron, and away you go. Super, super easy. But I'm going to stitch it up super fast. Now, because I'm stitching white on white this time, I'm not going to use a fancy stitch. We're just going to go with a straight seam, and just make sure that it's the pocket, that little pocket is going to be deep enough for my ribbon to draw it. Okay, so here we are at the sewing machine. And this time, because I don't have that pretty hem to work with, I'm going to go from edge to edge on this corner. Again, you don't have to do that. That depends on what you're using to create what kind of fabric you're using. But I'm just going to go from edge to edge here. Okay. Well, I lied. I forgot. I have it set up for this fancy stitch, so here we go. This pretty little stitch really does have a nice effect, even white on white. I could have rethreaded my machine and done a pretty blue, and it would have been a pretty embellishment at the top of this. That is totally up to you and what your machine is capable of doing. Okay, stop at each corner, snip. Pull this through, keep going. The next one. And here I'm going to switch back to I'm going to switch back to standard straight stitch because this is for demonstration purposes. One of the things I like about this machine too, since you don't have to use a pedal, there's a little bar right up here where you can adjust the speed, which of course you do with a pedal if you're using a pedal, but in this case that's how you adjust the speed, and I really like that. I've kind of forced myself for the last couple of months to work without a pedal just to get used to what that's like. And it's been kind of a fun experiment. I'm not sure I'll go back. So this is the third side. See, there are a bunch of you watching. Let me know where you're watching from. I would love to know. And are you sewing? Is this something you're listening to maybe while you're doing a project or thinking about starting a project? What are you up to today? As I said before, I started my day in the garden, and then it got too hot, and so I'm inside sewing for a while. And then as the sun goes down, or starts to go down, I will head back out to the garden and get a little more work done out there. Tomorrow, I'm going to have two tutorials for how to make a rain barrel and how to make a super inexpensive planter too for your garden. So I hope you will join me, and if you like and if you hit follow, you should get a notification every time I do a tutorial. I have a bunch of things. We are really working on our backyard this spring. And so I have a bunch of projects out there that I have done already for tutorials and that I am going to be doing in the future, including these super cute rain barrels that are fantastic. And then also these barrel planters, which I absolutely love too. Okay, so as I said before, when I made the bag like this, that I used the tablecloth for, this gap right in between the two triangles was actually quite big. And so what I did, and I'll show you, I'll do it here too, though you don't have to do it when it's this small. But what I did was fold these together so that the two seams line up. And then I put a clip here, and I put a clip here, and then I made a seam right along here. Basically, from the seam that is holding, from the channel seam, oh, you're not even able to see, from this channel seam to the edge of the fabric. So I'll show you that right now. It is not necessary when it's this small, but I felt like when I was making that larger one, it just helped handle the bulk of the fabric a little better when I went to pull the drawstrings tight. So that's why I did it. You could even, if you wanted to, stitch this little point down, but I don't think there's any reason to do that. So you see now, there's the camera, there's just a little seam right here. And that is just simply to help handle that bulk of fabric. I'm not even going to do it on all four on this because it is completely unnecessary when they're this little. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is take, I have this sweet seam binding tape. I love this. It's so cute, and I'm going to use this as the ribbon. And so to do that, I'm going to fold this over and under and sew that end in closed. You might need to fold the corners in, just like that, so it's all tucked in and closed. And then I'm going to do a seam all the way down and then do the same thing on the other end. So you can find seam binding tape in all kinds of fun patterns. I gotta slow that way down. Okay, pick it up, turn it at a right angle. You can find it in all kinds of fun patterns, and I love this cute little floral. And now it's going to make fantastic little ribbon closure for this. Okay, now I can speed it up a little bit. And here I'm doing about 1/8 of an inch. You can make your own seam binding tape too. There are some really cool tools that help you make bias tape or seam binding tape super easily. So any fabric that you want, you can make into bias tape, which is really fun if you want to use that instead of ribbon. In this case, I just didn't have a ribbon that matched the blue in that napkin well enough, and I didn't have anything yellow. Those two would have been the ideal colors, but this has flecks of that blue and also yellow in it, in addition to some other colors, so I felt like this worked really well. So just feeding that through. Super easy straight stitch. And I'm going to stop. And I'm going to fold this end. So I'm folding the corners. It's really hard to show you. I'm folding the corners in to make a point, and then I'm folding that under, going close. You can do this with a pin. I'm going to live dangerously and just hold it. But you can pin that. Stop. One more stitch. Okay, now I'm going to pick it up, turn it. That is not wanting to move. Okay, and away we go. And so that's now sewn across the end, and that'll be nice and durable. This end is sewn closed too. All right, let's go back over to the table. Okay, so here we have it. We're going to do exactly the same thing that we did before. I'm going to put a safety pin in the end, because that makes it super easy to pull it through the channel. And in this case, I don't have, it's not directional. But one of the things I didn't mention. So the place where you start the ribbon running through is going to be where you end up with a bow. So you could put it right next to the embroidery. That doesn't matter on this, it didn't matter. All four corners are exactly the same. It doesn't matter. But on this one, I have embroidery here. So I think I want the bow to be over on this side, right by the embroidery. So just start it there. And then the bow will end up on that side too. And here's where I did that stitch to hold things together. So it just kind of makes a corner that you navigate with your safety pin. Pull this through. This is side number 3. If you decide to line your to line a napkin or a tablecloth like this, remember that the lining is actually going to be on the outside of the package. So you want to choose something that, like this part, if you're folding the flaps over and you have the right side of the flaps here, this part is going to be your lining fabric. So you can create some really cool contrast that way. If you've had a white, fabric and then, you know, this was your lining actually is the outside. So you'd have white flaps and then this fabric, or, you know, however you ended up doing that. So just to remember that, the lining fabric, it's not the inside in this case, it's actually the outside. And then your napkin or tablecloth or whatever becomes the inside lining fabric. Okay, so I pulled that through. Let's get these even. Simple. Pull that tight. You could use this as a jewelry bag. You could use it, obviously, as gift wrap. I'm going to just tuck this inside so you can see what it's like when it's full. Make those tails even. Pull it closed. And hopefully your gift recipient is just going to absolutely love this. A little candle would fit inside this bag. Some lotion or a nice lip gloss and a couple of other things. This is a great way to wrap a gift certificate. You can, you know, just wrap whatever you're going to put in tissue paper. And then this is reusable or is part of the gift, or can be re-gifted to somebody else, whatever your recipient wants to do. But I think it's a super sweet little bag, just like that. And these petals kind of fold over. If you want your petals not to be as big, you know, this one, the petals aren't as big because this embroidery motif is there, but we wanted to give that enough room to show. So let me switch over to this view and I'll show you. So here's that sweet little bag, all done and ready to go and ready to be given to somebody. I love these. So if you have joined me throughout, my name is Angela. I'm Mid-Modern Mama at midmodernmama.com. And we talked about how to make these kind of two ways today, this sweet little petal bag. I am using vintage napkins, but you can use regular napkins. You can use squares of fabric. All it takes is a square of fabric, or 2 squares. And I will tell you, if you are not a sewer at all, and you found some fabric that you wanted to use, all you actually need to do is cut it with a pair of pinking shears. So pinking shears will keep fabric from fraying on the edges. This fabric is starting to fray because I washed it, and so if you pinked the edges of the fabric, then it would work just fine. And you don't even, I'll show you another quick tip too. I'm going to switch back to this, this view. So if you don't even want to create a drawstring bag and you want to wrap something, I'm going to use this as my sample. Please wrap it in tissue before you do this, but you can. This is a Japanese method for wrapping, which I absolutely love. So you have a square, you have a gift inside, wrap that in some bubble wrap or tissue paper before you actually do this. But here's 1, 2, 3, 4, Just tuck this through. This was not the right shape to demonstrate this with, but you get a pretty knot on the top. That little embroidered flower is visible, and it is as simple as a gift wrap as you can possibly imagine, and this is reusable too. So even if you are you don't have time to sew, or you don't sew, you can still use a napkin as gift wrap, which is super handy. So keep a stack of these in where your gift wrap is kept, and you have something to be able to do. I also have another tutorial, another sewing tutorial. I do a lot of embroidery, and I have a lot of little pieces of embroidered motifs of all kinds that I wasn't sure what to do with, and so I started making little bags out of them. And I have another tutorial that shows you how to do that. It's a very simple drawstring bag. Again, a great way to wrap a present and make the gift wrap part of the gift. In this case, I also, in this tutorial, show you how to make a sachet to tuck inside. So this can be a sachet, or it can be gift wrap, whatever you want. So check that out as well. That is another fun and easy project. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Again, there are a bunch of other tutorials coming up, all kinds of projects that I'm going to show you how to do here on Amazon. But if you want to be notified about that, be sure you hover over in the top corner, and it'll give you a chance to follow. And I would love to have you follow me. That would be fantastic. But there are all kinds of things coming up, all kinds of projects that I'm going to show you how to do with the Cricut, sewing projects, all kinds of stuff coming up. So thanks so much. I really hope you will follow and let me know in the comments. I'll stick around for a couple of minutes. If you have questions or comments, I'd be happy to take them and answer them. Thank you so much.